the geofence is a static boundary of a defined area, whereas a proximity service is really as I'm traversing through a building, what is around me right now? Is it in a mall? It could be points of interest. And that again could be used for triggering messages or just for passive analytics. So there's a lot of different things we can do.
Hello and welcome to the Mapscaping podcast. My name is Daniel and this is a podcast about people and companies that are doing really exciting things in the geospatial world. Today I'm lucky enough to be talking to Chris Wiggin from Jibestream, and he's here to tell us about indoor mapping and geolocation inside and the challenges that they face doing that and what it's currently being used for. Hi Chris.
Hey, good afternoon.
Thanks so much for taking the time to come along and talk to us today.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you.
Maybe you could start by just introducing yourself a little bit, telling us a little bit about your background and what Jibestream is doing.
Sure. Well, my name is Chris Wiggin, and I'm CEO and co-founder of Jibestream. We've actually in our 10th year now, so it's been an excellent journey for us. And for me personally, I've always been an entrepreneur, so I put myself in that serial entrepreneur category and starting businesses from a very young age. Maybe the first time I was 9 or 10 was some sort of painting, grass cutting business, and several others after that. And moving into technology for me was a natural segue from working at a traditional print shop that was going digital. That really was the beginning of sort of that CRM based one-to-one messaging, which was very interesting for me in terms of how we reach people and with the most impact. And that's really where we started, is in shopping malls, trying to deliver the right message to the right person at the right time. Our first concepts had facial recognition that would detect age and gender, and of course location. It was at a kiosk at that time, and trying to make sure that we were giving somebody some intelligent wayfinding instructions in terms of where are you right now, what are you going to be passing along the way, what's the weather, the temperature, and perhaps what's the most relevant message to you. So from that point on, the facial recognition never actually made it through. The idea of delivering the right message at the right time has always sort of stayed with us, and now much more impactful with location awareness and mobile. And we moved on to expand our products or our verticals from just shopping malls to include places like NATO headquarters, the Pentagon, hospitals, corporate campuses, and really we are now a fully horizontal platform with a myriad of use cases that all involve location and mapping.
Excellent. I think for some of the listeners, we were probably jumped into it a little bit deep there right from the start. You mentioned a whole bunch of things there. You mentioned geolocation and right time messages. And so I'm thinking we're over in some location-based services. How are you locating things inside? This is traditionally a really, really difficult thing to do. I don't think GPS is probably the right tool for the job. Can you explain to us how you're doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything starts for us. We typically work in large complex buildings, and we start with the base building drawings, so the CAD drawings, and convert them into vector-based files so that we have what we consider the building to be addressable. And for us, addressable means that the map is broken down into objects and layers that can be connected with third-party systems. And some of the systems could include things like asset tracking. So assets, as we know, are many different things. It could be things or people or devices. And we're agnostic to the different technologies that are out there today in terms of how we capture location. So depending on what the use case is, if it's just straight wayfinding and getting someone from point A to point B with a blue dot, that may be done with beacons. If it's going to be something perhaps more mission critical in a hospital, ultrasound in terms of the location technologies. And we're really always just sizing up, what's the level of accuracy we need and what's the right technology and solutioning for that. As I mentioned, navigation has been a key part of this and always will be. But it's also becoming, as we move into the world of IoT, data visualization, and there's information that has a spatial context that today just lives on a list format to sort of report. And we give that context by putting it on a map. And that can be anything from room occupancy to what's the status of an infusion pump in a hospital, really anything that has spatial context, we give the tools through our platform to put that in reference to a map.
And how would this, how would positioning work with a beacon or ultrasound? What's the process for that?
Well, first we need to make sure that the building itself is geospatially accurate on the world map, so that we, not just from beacons and otherwise, but that somebody could seamlessly travel from outdoors to indoors, and we can continue that journey. Once we're inside, like I said, depending on the level of accuracy required, there could be BLE beacons that are battery powered, that are on the ceiling, different places to create a mesh network that we can triangulate from. Or it could be ultrasound, which similarly have hardware. And the big change that's happening right now is whether those are powered by batteries or by power over Ethernet type of thing. And there's another player in the mix with this, usually, or always for us when it comes to positioning. We are the visualization tool of that blue dot or device, the indoor positioning system companies that are triangulating those sensors and passing us an XYZ coordinate so that we can put that on the map.
Wow, it's pretty amazing. Do you guys make all your own? Obviously, you make your own software and program your own software. What about hardware? And how does this positioning work? Do I get a completely different device for this? Is it another completely separate device I have to carry around, or does it work on a tablet, or what kind of hardware do I need as a user of this?
Well, it works on any device. Our platform itself is a deployed through SDKs and APIs. We have web and then native Android and iOS, and it will obviously work on any mobile device with those platforms. And we don't actually own or produce any of the hardware. We've kept ourselves very open and agnostic to that. It is a fast changing sort of world when it comes to location hardware. And we really work with whatever our clients have, or we suggest what we think will work best depending on the use case and what they're looking to do.
Okay, so if I try and sort of summarize this a little bit, you guys do positioning inside. We've definitely established that, and you rely heavily on users coming with data. So they have CAD files or GIS files which you upload to your system in some way, and then you decide, depending on the level of accuracy needed, you choose the hardware for that, either the beacons or the ultrasound, or maybe a third kind of hardware, and you throw all that together, and then you do what with it? What? So okay, great. So people can find their way around. You said something about just-in-time messaging before. Was that correct? Is this part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's many different use cases depending on. Just to step back for a minute, it could be a guest or employee-facing application. I'm trying to look for something like a meeting room in a corporate office, or it could be even something more back office, like I'm a security guard and I need to respond to something. So the types of messages and alerts that somebody might get, or even the navigation that get through the building, is quite different. It is based on your profile, which is a major feature of ours. It's where the view that you're going to have on your device is really dependent upon what the rules and role-based access you have to that information. Meaning a security guard would have information that's restricted back of house hallways and things like that versus someone corporate. And so now that we have that established, you exactly nailed it right there. There's geofences, which is a defined boundary within a building or around a building. We kind of treat a whole campus as a big indoor map if it's going to be the same journey for that customer in terms of how they want to use the maps. And that means that as I walk into that boundary, it would trigger an event. That event could be anything from a pop-up message, meaning welcome, or it could be a security alert if somebody doesn't have access to that area and they've walked into it as a visitor in a building, or it could be just pure passive analytics and understanding how many people have gone through that area and how long they're staying there. Perhaps we can start to calculate things like wait times in a hospital based on how long people have been sitting in a certain area, like a waiting room. Another thing that we have is something called proximity service. So the geofence is a static boundary of a defined area, whereas a proximity service is really as I'm traversing through a building, what is around me right now? Is it in a mall? It could be points of interest. And that again could be used for triggering messages or just for passive analytics. So there's a lot of different things we can do once we've got the map in digital format and set up, all these sort of things like geofences and have location awareness.
That's a really interesting and timely idea, the idea of personalized notifications. It seems to me when I look around the world now that things are becoming more and more personal. I even listened to a talk the other day, a podcast actually. Love podcasts. Listening to a podcast, and this person was talking about how when we're online, for example, our experiences are so not don't want to say manipulated, but they're designed for us. They're designed for each and every individual that arrives online, apart from our websites. And they were talking about how in the future that perhaps the website would change depending on who's looking at it and where they were looking at it from. I mean, that happens today with our search results. So I think this idea of personalized messages, especially depending on where you are, where your location is really, really interesting. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the future. You said before that this was a seamless, that the navigation was seamless, depending on, so there was no problem going from inside to outside. Have what kind of companies are using this, and what kind of areas? You talked about campuses before, and you talked about hospitals. Are they generally bigger locations that are interested in this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we think about when we first just started designing these systems, we were taking it from the perspective of somebody who was already in the building and in a certain position within that building. But the reality is that that journey did not start at the front doors of the building. They obviously start somewhere else, like home or somewhere else in the city, and you need to get from where you are to where you're going inside the building. And so what we want to do is remove friction from that experience. And friction is things like traffic. So, integrating with outdoor mapping and traffic can help us avoid that. And then also, when we look at reaching a building, I'm going somewhere inside the building, meaning if it's a hospital, it's a fracture clinic or something like that. Often what people have done in the past is they would type in their sort of search bar the address of the building they're going to, which might be the furthest point from where you're actually going inside. So what we do is geo-reference or geocode all of the indoor locations with the outdoor parking lots or parking garages, and that way I can say, from where perhaps I'm at home, hey, I'm going to the fracture clinic today, and it's going to take me to the west lot opposed to maybe the south lot where the mailing address is, and I've already removed friction because I'm closer to where I need to go. As I cross a geofence, actually of the whole boundary of the property or the building itself, it now becomes an indoor map, and we can start to rely on managing the look and feel and behavior of the map for that building. We can integrate with on-site location services rather than GPS, and really be with that person all the way out through their journey. And as things change, because often they do, maybe you've come for 3 appointments and the first appointment's backed up, and we know that from maybe an integration from the queuing system in a hospital, and we can have them go to appointment number two instead of number one first. So we're trying to do everything we can to always just make that as a seamless and frictionless experience for people. And we do that by integrating with as many third-party systems as possible to give us that real-time information. Just like when we're driving in our car, we're driving something with Waze. There's accidents, there's traffic, and we want to help people avoid those things, all relative inside as well.
Now, because we all have devices in our pockets, smartphones that we walk around with and are glued to every single second of every single day, and we have something called Google Maps, they've kind of brought location to the world, if that makes sense. It works on GPS, and it doesn't matter where you are, you can get those locations. They've managed to scale their services globally. This sounds like it's going to be a really difficult thing to scale. It sounds like it'll be a long time before we see perhaps one provider giving us the ability to navigate just as easily inside as we can outside. What do you think the future of this kind of technology is in terms of scale, in terms of being able to do this everywhere?
Well, I do agree it will take time, but what we are seeing is, most of the sort of industrialized world, corporate campuses, hospitals, all the major centers we go to, they've been working on pilots for the last 9 years, maybe longer, and we're starting to see much more I would call enterprise deployments happening. So not just a couple sites, but all of the sites. And will it be one provider? Not sure. What that will be comprised of, but we're certainly seeing that the enabling technologies are becoming much more ubiquitous, and that would be the location sensing technologies. And instead of always being deployed through a battery-based beacon, we're starting to think about these things before buildings are built. So putting it into the fixtures like lights and all different kinds of things where these sensors can live and then be turned on as needed for not just one use case, but several. And I think that's the big difference, is that the way why this is going to scale is because people are looking at this now as a platform play versus point solutions. So in the past, we'd see people turn on a whole infrastructure just for, say, turn by turn wayfinding, and now they're recognizing, hey, with addressable maps and location services, I can power security, facilities management, productivity use cases, facility, all these different kinds of things that really extend value across the whole enterprise. And I think once you have sort of full recognition of that, it becomes a lot faster because there is a business need. It's not a nice to have anymore. It's really becoming mission critical. And maps and location are being recognized now as a foundational layer to Internet of Things, maybe a middleware, but a very important one at that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think location data is just as important now as time data is, or has been for the last 30, 40, 50 years, maybe longer. I think it's everywhere. And I think when I'm a geographer myself, and I can remember the good old days when we used to run around saying that spatial is special. I don't think it is anymore. I think spatial is normal, and I think that's the road we're going down. We're just expecting it now. It's not a nice to have or an extra thing or something new and exciting. It's just going to be normal.
Completely agree.
If we go back to this idea of scaling navigation inside, I think about OpenStreetMap and what that's done for geolocation and mapping services the world over. And I wonder if you could imagine a time where perhaps we crowdsource, or where there's one source of data for buildings, for example, a detailed database where anyone can go to and get that kind of data. Because I can see that being a huge problem. I've had the opportunity to work with CAD files a lot in my day job, converting them to other file formats, and the data loss along the way. It can be a long road. It can be a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, it can be. And what we're seeing to solve for that is some standard formats. So, first, GeoJSON is becoming a universal standard for maps, and maybe a point of which different systems are, I guess, more likely to communicate with each other versus some proprietary versions of different map files. So that's been a big start. And maybe even more specifically, we'll see what kind of traction it gets over the next couple of years. But the Apple IMDF file formats, which and essentially Apple is looking for crowdsourced maps, but under very specific requirements and validation, so that they can build up their indoor maps warehouse from providers like Jibestream and others. And like I said, they've got a very specific requirement on those maps, and it's becoming a pretty much a standard in the industry for how buildings like shopping malls and others that want to share their maps publicly through Apple can do so. So I think that will be a big part. It has been a wild west so far in terms of specifications and requirements for maps, and I do see that is going to get standardized, and there's a big benefit for everybody to follow a standard. Just the question is, what will be the standard?
Location data is very personal, and we talked about that a little bit before. The idea of getting a personalized message depending on where you are. I'm lucky enough to live in Denmark, and we've just in the European Union, they've just passed some rules around the protection of personal data. Can you see that as being a problem for your industry, for this kind of continuous mapping, that this kind of continuous geolocation and tracking, I guess you could call it, because it is seamless. It'll happen. You'll move from the outside to the inside. You're not safe or protected in the inside. Can you see that as being a problem for your business?
I think if managed properly, like everything else, there's always a risk of privacy when handling any kind of data. Now, Jibestream ourselves, we've always had a very sort of clear policy around we don't own the data, we don't store the data, and often it's really not even in our possession, but it is in somebody's possession. And I think it comes down to always having opt-in use cases. When we look at sort of the if you had a child and at birth they said, we're going to put this chip in their arm so that if they're ever abducted, we'll be able to find them immediately and have them back safely in minutes, you'd be excited about that. Now, if they did the same thing and said, we're going to put this chip in their arm and we're going to track all their movements and market to them, based on their preferences and track them nefariously, you wouldn't be very willing to do that. So it's really going to have to be, why am I opting into this? Which is usually in exchange for value. At work, the value is to remove friction from my day, give me the option to turn it on or off. We have clients today that give their employees the opportunity, turn on my location to allow my quote friends or colleagues to know where I am all the time, or maybe just for a half an hour. And so I think that's going to be some very careful planning on the behalf of the sponsors of these sort of deployments, so that they build and maintain trust. Because I think that once somebody has their trust sort of shaken with a solution and it feels like, hey, this is not what I intended it to be tracking me for, people have the option to turn it off. And so I think we all have to be very careful about that. But there is just tremendous value on both sides of the equation for us to have these technologies, and it's always take with care, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I do agree with you. I think there is tremendous value in something in this kind of thing if managed and used correctly. I could imagine it would be quite easy to be the skeptical consumer and say, "Oh no, all I can see happening here is I walk past the McDonald's and I get a push notification on my phone that says, 'Hey, eat now,' kind of thing." But I think what we're talking about here in the examples that you've given, they're a lot, they're more sort of work related. Is that correct?
Well, there's always the opportunity, and what people always think of is what you mentioned is if I'm in a shopping environment, and that's not going anywhere. But I wouldn't want it to give the impression that that's the highest value or the only value proposition. I start to think about where we're working now as in worker safety. So people who are working in dangerous jobs, whether it be in mining or otherwise, they have a vested interest to be tracked and want to have someone automatically alerted if they have not arrived at where they should have in the time that they should have. We've got unfortunate situations where active shooters and different things like that, where we want to know that people are accounted for, or any kind of disaster emergency. And so those are the types of use cases that we're seeing come up more often now than just the sort of marketing use cases. And I think that the long term value and benefit to people is certainly making again that a must have versus a nice to have value proposition for our clients.
Yes. When I think about location-based services, and especially the kind of things that we've been talking about here for the last couple of minutes here, I think I wonder. I can't help but wonder when Facebook, when Apple, when Google is going to introduce their own version of this. Is that something that you think about? Can you see that on the horizon?
Absolutely. I mean, we see Apple has already entered into this space, but their model is very different. They work with companies like Jibestream to produce and manage the maps. That's not the business they necessarily want to be in. And I think the same sort of applies for all of these, sort of larger companies like Facebook, Google, Apple. They're not typically in the application business. They're more at the infrastructure platform side and looking to other providers, smaller providers like us, to produce really the special sauce around how are we deploying and managing these solutions. Many of them, it may appear that they're coming out with their own solutions, but it's made up of players like ourselves that are driving these technologies in the background. And that's for us, no problem. In any case, we're not completely brand centric that everybody needs to know this is a Jibestream solution. Our goal is really to drive OEM solutions and to be baked into these products, which could include those companies and often many other large corporations as well that want to have their own solution, and for very pragmatic reason. It takes many different components to create the end solution, and so they're taking best of breed of all the different things that comprise that solution, and that includes mapping, positioning, but also the user experience and all of the different things that somebody might do with that application in a day. So I think we will. It's unlikely that we're going to see a fully through and through Google or Facebook solution that's all internal technology. I think it'll be a myriad of technologies that make up that end solution.
Yeah, and I guess I should clarify what I'm thinking when I think of those larger companies coming into the space. I think of them coming in as just kind of creating awareness around it, what's possible. I think in general there's a bit of skepticism around just delivering all your data to someone like Google. If you're a large organization, if you're an airport, or if you're in a hospital or something like that, and not just Google, of course, but any sort of large corporate entity, I don't think people will just sort of hand over things. They'll be more inclined to take more of a, a, um, a solution they can control a little bit more themselves. But I see it as a way of just creating awareness around what's possible. And I think as soon as that's done, the idea, like people will start to expect this. They'll go to an airport. So I can see this great solution in front of me, where you arrive at the airport. It's a stressful situation. My flight's cancelled. A push notification arrives to my phone and says, "Here, walk this way, go this way, stand over here," kind of thing. And where you're personally sort of guided through the airport and shown what to do. That's of course just a very simple example, but I think once we come to expect more, then companies like Jivestream will also step up and start to deliver more.
Yeah, absolutely. And you raise a great point about data ownership, data control, and working with clients like San Francisco Airport. They really have a mandate to be their own digital landlord, which I think is an interesting model. And what that means is that they don't want outside mapping companies or airlines and different vendors in the airport all creating maps of their space for a number of reasons. One is consistency and accuracy and just control of the data. Whereas now that they've got their map digitized and combining that with location, they're going to be able to provide an API to anybody who wants maps of their location while being able to suppress proprietary data that they don't want to make public, depending on who you are. Some, if you're in emergency services, great, you get everything. Sometimes, if you're a different type of provider, you might just need basic maps. And so now they're in control of their space, and as they make changes, and frankly, not speaking specifically for them, but going into the future for airports and other venues like them, it could even become a revenue model to say, hey, we've got maps as an API that come with location, and pay a fee for that service type of thing. So it's changing dynamics out there, and I think we're going to see, just for the reason you said, nobody really wants to give everything over to any other large corporation like Google in terms of their proprietary data. They'll control it, and then they'll distribute it as they see fit.
Can you give me one of your favorite examples of indoor tracking, indoor mapping, indoor geolocation working really well, and some of the benefits that have come with it?
Yeah, I think that where I see the biggest benefits is in a place like a hospital. There's just so much going on in a hospital, and obviously, the reason people there ranges from a typical appointment to something that's maybe more life saving. And so, where we know where specific devices are, they literally can save lives or at least dramatically improve the outcome for patients. So that could be things like wheelchairs as a level of comfort. How am I getting someone from point A to point B, and knowing where those wheelchairs or beds are, to something like an infusion pump. And this can really make the difference if a health practitioner goes and grabs a piece of equipment, and it's supposed to be ready, but it's not. Maybe it's clean or dirty, sorry, and has a low battery. That can have a huge impact. So that's what really excites me, is when I see mission critical use cases being carried out with location technologies. And kind of in contrast to that, in a different environment in manufacturing, again, you've got buildings that are 3-4 million square feet with literally millions of things in them. Knowing where they are, how to find them, combining that with worker safety and things like that, is what I think is the exciting part about our future, is how we're really going to impact the way people work and live.
Could you imagine your system, or this idea of navigation inside? Could that be integrated with autonomous vehicles at some stage? Is it just as a,
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
I was just thinking when you gave that example, I'm assuming it was a warehouse you're talking about. you're talking about an incredibly large space filled with millions of objects. I just thought that would be the perfect use case for an autonomous vehicle or a robot of some kind, a pick pack, whatever. And if it had detailed information about where things were and where things and where the other robots were in relation to it, then it could be very efficient, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the key pain points or ways that we can really help with those sort of things is maps are always changing. And that's largely the most underestimated part about deploying an indoor positioning mapping system is not just getting it out there, but the day two, the management of those maps. So the way we solve for that is by integrating with, third-party systems, whether it be tenant management systems or whatever's controlling space, or sometimes we become that single source of truth and automating the change, or at least making it very easy to make changes so that everything is up to date and accurate. So, as in this case, the autonomous vehicle was looking for something, it is where it's supposed to be, and it's not bumping into any walls. I'm sure it wouldn't, anyways, but you get the point that the maps being up to date is a key thing, of course. And in some of our customers, they literally have hundreds or thousands of changes a month that are really largely automated through these integrations.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like maps, location is constantly changing, and data is only good if it's correct and up to date and accurate. I would personally rather have no data than inaccurate data. How do you push out these changes? I remember reading on your website at some stage there that the system would work offline as well. So let's say I'm offline. How do I know I've got the most correct, accurate data?
Well, the map loads the first time, so you would need an internet connection or data connection on initial load. But once it has, then you have that as cached on your device. And whether you're online or offline, you're going to have access to all of the points of interest and the navigation and everything you expect in terms of that experience. What you wouldn't get offline is any new updates. That being said, with our platform, we have the ability to push updates across all devices at the same time by publishing a change in our content management system. And that would, although it's going out to all the devices, as I mentioned earlier, the profiles feature, depending on your role and your access and what your user experience is defined by all of that, you would get the updates as well. It just may be more in depth if you're having full access to a map with all of the back of house areas, or it may just be a sort of limited view. But the point is, we manage it all in one place, and you publish that change once, and then it would be updated and refreshed across the devices that are consuming that API.
When I realize we've touched on this a little bit in the before in the conversation, but I just wanted to ask you, what can we expect of this kind of technology in the future? More of the same, just faster, or can we expect are there new sort of exciting things just around the corner?
Well, I really believe that having the foundational layer of maps and location infrastructure, it's going to be now up to the business units or sort of people that are defining sort of these use cases of what they want to do, because really the only limitation is your imagination. We're seeing people do new and interesting things every day. As I mentioned, I think it's becoming much more about sort of these operational mission critical use cases. But I'd say the first thing we're going to see is just going back to earlier in our conversation, is scale. Where can we expect to see these things? We're going to be, really become quite accustomed to having it available to us in most of the environments we go into. And we're moving definitely from this sort of pilot stage to more ubiquitous deployment. So that's exciting. Um, we still have some hurdles to get over, though, and that really comes down to interoperability. There are still legacy systems at the facilities management level and all levels that maybe still have some modernization to do in terms of the types of maps that they can share from their base building drawings out to systems like ours. And other sets of data that become very important for these use cases need to make sure that they can essentially talk to each other, as we always say in Internet of Things. So the next year, I think we're going to see scale and more interoperability. But from there, we can expect to see all the things that we're getting outside. And I think that's the big thing, is that the indoor world is the next frontier. So we've got excellent location analytics. We've got excellent seamless and frictionless driving because of traffic apps and things like that. And all of those same things that we've been experiencing outside should be available inside, perhaps with more. Maybe there's going to be more things like augmented or mixed reality, and the more data we can share and interoperate with and put it in context of a map just brings so much more value, and then new ideas on what we can do next. So I believe that once we have it sort of going, it's going to morph itself. And again, every day we're surprised and delighted by the ideas that our customers have to solve their business needs using maps and location. And it's the world we're living in today is it's very real time and also just in time. We'd love to say that we're all planning ahead for everything, but often we're leaving one meeting room and we've got somewhere to be, and getting to that room based on maybe elevators down or something like that. It seamlessly navigating us around. And then the world of automation. I walk into an area of the building, it knows my preferences, or maybe I'm the only one there. And it's got different lighting controls, or into a room and the phone starts dialing. So it becomes this big seamless journey, as I keep saying. But it's the premise of all of it is location.
I think that is a fantastic way of looking at it when you said that we can expect all the things we have outside today inside. There was I think you really nailed it there. That's definitely my expectation as well. But like you said, maybe just a little bit richer, because I think the nuances in a home or in a building, in a place of work, yeah, I think once they're mapped, once they have a location, then yeah, I think we'll be in for some really exciting times. What would you say to someone, or what would you encourage them to do? Someone who is looking into getting into GIS, into mapping, into geospatial today. I'm at university. What should I study? What should I think about? What kind of skills should I acquire?
Wow, that's a great question. I guess for me, it's an overused word, of course, but the Internet of Things. What are sort of the background information I can have to understand interoperability of technologies and systems would be a great place to start. Because really, a map is just a map if you don't have the ability to push real-time updates, and sort of all these other technologies say having a blue dot is just a blue dot without a map, and it's not in context. So we really have to learn, how do these technologies come together, and what are the ways that it can be deployed. And it's not always about a visual rendering of a map either. So starting to look at things like conversational interfaces, very lightweight applications. I'm in a building and I looking for a restroom or something like that, and it just automatically detecting where I am, and then providing directions either visually or through text directions. And all of that in the background is systems talking to each other. It knows where you are seamlessly. If it was to do with a room or something like that, or a piece of equipment that you needed, which one's closest, what's its status, and I think can't say enough about interoperability. So whatever somebody can do to be as educated as possible in the working knowledge of interoperability, I think that's a great platform. And as you mentioned earlier, I don't think we're going to be talking about mappings and location so much. It's just going to be a given and expected, and will just be the canvas in which all of these systems are really presented to the end users.
I think we're slowly but surely coming to the end of our time together. Is there somewhere we can go to learn more about you and more about your company?
Absolutely. So please visit jibestream.com. We have lots of great resources there, ranging from just the web pages themselves. But if you really want to dig in, we've got some excellent white papers and webinars with our end customers, which is always great to see and learn from. And follow us on major channels: Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn.
Excellent. Thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot as well. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I really hope you enjoyed that interview with Andy from Jibestream. I think he raised some really interesting points about indoor mapping, the challenges that are associated with it, and where it's going as a technology, and what we can expect to see in this area in the future. I apologize for the sound quality on this episode. I had to cut the audio files quite a bit, so I realise the sound jumps around a little bit there. It's something I am working on, so I hope that this will improve in the future. And as always, if you have any questions or comments about this podcast, please find Mapscaping on all of the ways, the different social media channels. We're there, just search for us, or there's a full transcript of this podcast on our website. It's mapscaping.com/blogs/podcasts. Thanks very much, and we'll talk soon. Hello and welcome to the Mapscaping podcast. My name is Daniel, and this is a podcast about people and companies that are doing really exciting things in the geospatial world.